Ju-i, which is, of course, Japanese for Achtung, Achtung, as regular listeners of We Have Ways of Making You Talk will know. And, that's what you're listening to, We Have Ways of Making You Talk. This isn't something else, is it, James?
No.
So
there can be only one.
There can be...
There can be many intros, but only one We Have Ways podcast. And here we are at episode 407. Who'd have thought it?
I know, that's amazing.
Yeah. That's 2 more runs than Graham Hick's high score.
I saw him bat once in county cricket a very long time ago. It was at Lords. I can't remember what the fixture was because I used to have a job doing cushions at Lords.
Did you really?
I knew the guy who did the cushions at Lords and Wimbledon, and it was a great holiday job when I was a student.
Yeah, I bet.
And you'd be on the barrow in the morning, then you'd watch the sport all day, and then you'd have to pick them up last thing after it all ended.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That seems like a completely fair do.
And I saw Hick during the bit where they were trying to figure out how to make him English.
Yeah.
And he was amazing.
Yeah, pre-19, whenever it was.
Yeah, totally imperious,
Yeah.
The whole thing. And then, of course, comes to England, doesn't ever quite happen. Strange, wasn't it?
Well, I think that was a lot to do with selection, wasn't it? Selection policy back in those days, sort of stop, start. If they'd given him a good run today, I mean, he would have ended up being brilliant. He came actually and played in the opening, the inaugural match at the new Chalk Valley Cricket Club.
Did he?
Ground up at Bowerchalk in 2011, which was coincidentally my 40th birthday. We had a Spitfire flyover at tea time.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
We did. It wasn't a Mark 1, it was 5. But it was still very, very good. And it was amazing because Mark Cuff came into bowl, and Cuffy is an absolute legend of the club, been around for absolutely ever. He's retired now, but now carries on as groundsman. But anyway, he used to bowl these kind of sort of back of the hand leg spinners.
Yeah.
Anyway, literally first ball, Graham Hick just hit him for 6. I mean, straight into the churchyard. You've never seen anyone hit a 6 so effortlessly. I mean, he barely touched it. And literally, I kid you not, 2 balls later, he was caught out at mid-off.
Oh, really? Oh, that's all right then.
So Cuffy felled Graham Hick. And in this kind of celebrity team match, it was the Bunburys, David English Bunbury's team. Cuffy got something like 3 for 12.
Well, that's very strong.
Is that absolutely amazing? Yeah, it's very, very strong.
Very strong.
We digress from Chewy.
Why Japanese today, you may be wondering, regular listener or newbie? Well, on December the 13th, 1941, so 80 years ago to the day we're recording this episode, a curious little incident took place that would have major repercussions. It was called the Niihau incident, and it involved a crashed Japanese plane on the Hawaiian island of Niihau, and the attempt by 3 Hawaiians of Japanese descent to help him escape, get armed and take hostages. Now, no big deal in and of itself, but some historians believe this incident led to the internment of Japanese Americans.
Well, obviously, moods at fever pitch, isn't it? And
yes, but we've talked about.
Internment of Japanese Americans was pretty savage. I think it was a bit more kind of brutal than chucking the German Jews on the Isle of Man. Yeah,
but we've talked before about how last week we were talking to Waitman about how events get leapt on by institutions that have something in mind anyway, and I think that's maybe that the Niihau incident is in a way nothing to do with it. I mean, I don't know anything about this, but maybe it's you give the authorities an excuse and they can jump on a thing, can't they?
Put it this way: think how paranoid people are today, and how full of conspiracy theories people are, and then kind of take it back to the fact that you're actually in a world war. Is it any wonder that people were a little bit suspicious and imagining fifth columnists and kind of parachuting German lines and all the rest of it?
And everything's drenched in a kind of racism anyway. That
right. But the Nisei, the Nisei regiment and troops, the Japanese troops, particularly in Italy, were ferocious and brilliant and absolutely did Uncle Sam proud, etc., etc. But just another big moment in our 80th anniversary of 1941.
I know, it's a big week.
The biggest month in the whole of the World War II.
The biggest month of the Second World War.
World War II.
World War II. Adolf Hitler, dictator of Germania. Anyway, now before we get going properly, on Thursday we've an unusual but fascinating guest on the show, a young American woman called Autumn Hendrickson, who's investigated the Second World War stories of all the people from a single US town called Reading. And for members of the that there are American towns
You just
called
think Ricky
Reading.
Gervais, don't you?
And for members of the independent company, a quick notice, there's no live stream next week. Mr. Holland is in Sri Lanka sunning himself while the rest of us pretend to enjoy
Hopefully. I'm not. Anyway,
Well,
I'm doing important research onto Ceylon's wartime effort. And,
I'm going to see if Supergrass have still got it that night. So there we go. So that's my important research. Now,
apparently they have.
Yeah, well, the last time I saw them, they were truly amazing, but that was a long time ago. Anyway, I've got something I thought we might talk about.
Go on then.
Well, my in-laws, my mother-in-law, she brought some pages from the parish newsletter. Now, I'm gonna omit a couple of tiny details.
Okay, but date.
Oh,
recent parish.
4th of September to 2021.
Okay, so this is really recent.
And it's reflections on a military show. I'm not going to say where because I don't want to get into sort of a mudslinging thing. Right. Now, it's a long letter, but it's very, very interesting. It's become customary to warn people that what they may be about to see, hear or read might upset or offend them. The following text might have that effect. I was born in 1939, a few months before the start of the Second World War. I live with my family in Islington, North London, throughout the war, and we narrowly survived the Blitz, the continuing bombing of London, the onslaught by V1 and V2 vengeance weapons. For many months we slept in a dank and spider-infested Anderson shelter in the back garden, fearful of being blown to bits like 7 close neighbours, and waiting for the air raid sirens to sound the all clear. Fortunately, the defeat of the Luftwaffe by the RAF in the Battle of Britain thwarted Hitler's plan to invade and occupy Great Britain. Had the Germans been successful, I and the rest of my Jewish family might well have been taken to a concentration camp to be gassed and incinerated, sharing the fate of millions of people considered by the Germans to be untermenschen, subhuman. Clearly, we did not suffer this fate, but my war-torn childhood left me with an abiding interest in the history of the war and the Holocaust and a grave suspicion of nationalism. The nightly bombing raids, the thunder of anti-aircraft guns, the probing glare of searchlights in the night sky has left me with a morbid fascination with warfare. The regular passage of military vehicles past our house fueled this interest, as did the curious hobby, enjoyed at that time by many small boys, of collecting shrapnel from the many bomb sites in the neighbourhood and displaying choice pieces of mangled metal on the mantelpiece. It is perhaps not surprising, therefore, that I looked forward to satisfying this appetite for military hardware by attending a show that I'm not going to name because I don't want to have a bun fight. This event is regarded by many as a worthy experience with laudable intentions. To quote the organisers, this show is a not-for-profit local show run by a small team of military vehicle enthusiasts and collectors. Our mission is simple: to run a friendly and inclusive event with the aim of promoting and raising much-needed funds for military charities. This year, the show was attended by some 15,000 visitors. Core jealous. Was clearly a success and must have raised a large sum of money for the charities it supports. Right, now here comes the meat. However, I was horrified to see that the show was tainted by the presence of several displays of Nazi regalia and weapons, attended by people, reenactors in inverted commas, wearing Nazi uniforms. 2 of these exhibits referred explicitly to the SS, the Schutzstaffel, a major paramilitary organisation owing allegiance to Adolf Hitler and the German Nazi Party. The SS participated in arguably the most horrific crimes in recorded history, namely the extermination on an industrial scale of Jews, Roma, gay people and other groups thought by the Nazis to be subhuman. The SS also took part in unspeakable medical experiments on men, women and children in the murder of people, including thousands of children considered to be disabled or a genetic threat to future generations and therefore unworthy of life. Why these reenactors chose to spend a weekend in Surrey dressed as mass murderers puzzled me. To gain insight, here we go. To gain insight, I spoke at some length to 2 of them, who were proud to pose for photographs in their SS uniforms. They told me they regarded their activities as living history and that their intention was to extol the virtues of the SS as an elite military cadre worthy of admiration. They were reluctant to discuss the sickening record of the SS and disagreed with my suggestion that their grotesque masquerade sanitised and glamorised the murderous organisation they personified. They bridled at my notion that a more informative and balanced display of living history would have included, for example, a mass grave, a crematorium, a pile of human ashes, or a large sack of human hair. I also asked them how I could distinguish a Nazi reenactor from a neo-Nazi. If a person dresses up as a member of the SS and professes admiration for their values and military prowess despite knowing their vile history, I would suspect that he or she would be attracted to the far-right movements of today. Their responses could be summarised as stout denial. Another exhibit depicted the Volkssturm, a deeply unsavoury Nazi paramilitary organisation which conscripted and armed young boys and old men in a futile attempt to bolster the defence of the German Reich in the closing stages of the war. Members of the Volkssturm committed atrocities against fellow German citizens. In my view, this portrayal of organisations whose chief function was the systematic extermination of many millions of children, women and men was abhorrent. It was especially shocking in the setting of a local village event attended by large numbers of children, whose benign objective was to entertain, be friendly and inclusive, and to raise money for charity. The website did not contain explicit warnings that the show would include such offensive displays. The presence of these charades at the show could be interpreted as a support for neo-Nazi groups. A stand selling Nazi militaria and prominently displaying swastika flags could only add to this impression. We live in an era of heightened nationalism, xenophobia and the resurgence of extremism. Do we wish this to be regarded as a community that could be seen, albeit mistakenly, to provide a platform for such odious organisations and to endorse their values? That's in my mother-in-law's parish newsletter.
Wow.
And then,
well, I'm afraid I completely agree with him.
I mean, I completely agree. And the organisers reply and kind of go, sorry for any offence caused. The issues raised about the German reactors are complex, something we're not shying away from. But we recognise, basically saying, yeah, you know what, we think we may have messed up here. The thing is, we've talked about this before, but to see the idea that someone challenged these guys is really, really fascinating, I think. Because
I think it is. And I mean, literally, I mean, I would say 10 years ago, if you got Second World War reenactors, they'd either be American or they'd be German.
Yeah.
And if they're German, 9 times out of 10, they're SS. Not always, but 9 times out of 10. So we got this. So I got to know this guy. He's a really lovely bloke. And he came down with this Stug. They had this Stug. They all turned up and they were freaking SS. They were dressed in SS stuff, Waffen SS. Yeah. And I said, do you want to go for a ride? And Ned was younger then, and I said, yeah, okay, fine. And I was just thinking, oh Christ, this is an absolute nightmare. It's a Daily Mail Chalk History Festival. There's all these SS people here, and not casting any aspersions on the Daily Mail, I hasten to add, just more that, it could be very embarrassing for them, as for us, and anyway, we got in there, and in the freaking turret, there was a picture on a piece of blue tack of Hitler, and it was just sort of, stop this tank time. I mean, it was just, I didn't have the, I should have just said, right, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave now. This is horrendous. But because it was my fault, I should have done more due diligence. But we made a decision there and then, never, ever, ever to have any SS anywhere near our festival ever again. And I would, and I feel more hardcore about that than I ever did. I suppose what I used to think about it was, it's a bit weird if someone wants to dress like that. Why would you want to do that? It's a bit odd, but I suppose you have you wouldn't sort of shy away from having kind of sort of Mongols when you're doing Genghis Khan or whatever. But that's just a completely rubbish argument and doesn't stand any test whatsoever. I mean, now I feel absolutely 100%. I wouldn't have anyone wearing any kind of SS insignia at all. I would sort of possibly have some Wehrmacht, just maybe, but I don't really, something like at Warfest 5, for example, I don't see any need for it at all. No. I don't see any need for it. We know what Germans look like. I'd be interested to have some German armour, but I wouldn't particularly want them all dressed up as Germans. No, I mean, it's interesting though that this idea that these guys said, they were, what they were interested in was, presenting what is it they say? Their intention was to extol the virtues of the SS as an elite military cadre worthy of admiration. I think if you... there's so many problems with that. Well, exactly, because they're not. And if that's they're ill-disciplined, they're kind of commanded by street brawlers. Exactly. Some of them end up being quite good, but that's sort of more by kind of, virtue of experience than it is because of training and because of their elite approach to soldiering. I mean, that's just absolute bollocks. Well, precisely. I mean, that's the thing that people people have persuaded themselves of. Is interesting because that's basically Second World War Nazi propaganda, isn't it? That they've swallowed whole, isn't it? The idea that the SS is elite. Okay, it's not that. It is that, but it's this. It's absolutely white supremacy and all that kind of stuff. That is what it's all about. It just is, and anyone who says, "Oh, I'm just doing it because of the historical interest," I'm sorry, you that doesn't wash. Yeah, it doesn't wash because everybody if you're interested enough to put on a German uniform from the Second World War, you know enough about the Second World War to know that the SS were absolutely rotten to the core. And okay, by the end of the Second World War, some people were being forced into joining Waffen-SS units. And had no say in the matter, but
by the same token, by the end
of the SS absolutely is crystal clear.
By the same token, by the end of the Second World War, you know exactly what the Nazi state is. You know,
right?
It's not like it's not like joining in 1937 and going, or 1934 and having no proper understanding of what you're getting yourself into. But I suppose what I'm saying is you might have a few people who've been conscripted into the Waffen-SS division, so you have no choice in the matter. But you do have choice in the matter. That's the difference. You have a choice of dressing up as a British Tommy or an American or whatever. Or a French resistance type, or a Waffen-SS person, or frankly even a Wehrmacht person, and you have chosen to put on an SS uniform, and that is deeply troubling, whichever way you look at it. And it basically means that you know, I'm sorry, but I cannot, I would not. I think anyone who does that voluntarily almost certainly is racist, and is almost certainly nationalist, and is also almost certainly a white supremacist. They might not admit it, but at their core they are going to be, because there was no other reason for doing it. Or simply doesn't care.
I just think you must do, because you've made a choice. You've chosen to wear that, and you're not just doing it for the uniform. You would know.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's very interesting as well, because I mean, in a weird way, this sort of crosses over with the. I've been reading Helen Fry's "The Walls Have Ears," and you know, which is about Latimer House, Trent Park, Wilton House, where they've got all the captured brass, basically. So, and it's a big hall of generals after 1942.
Is it a Wilton House too?
Yeah.
Just down the road from me.
No, it's called that, but it's not there. It's part of the same. It's part, I think. Anyway,
it's Trent Park.
It's Trent Park. It's Trent Park, Latimer House. Yeah, it's the most amazing thing. And again, the weird thing about this is my mother-in-law's father worked there, and he's in the staff list at the back of the book. Captain E.A. Morton is in the back of the book. And I say to her, well, you know. Oh, he never really talked about it. He says he did a bit of translating, but he never really talked about it. And then he went, you know, and you're like, damn it. But basically, and this is the thing that when we spoke to Waitman last week, the sort of question we ended up on was, is there any such thing as the clean Wehrmacht? Because these things that we're talking about the same subject here in lots of ways. And it is clear from the conversations at Latimer House that absolutely everyone Colonel Up knew exactly what was going on, right? In terms of genocide, and you've got them expressed. Some of them being mortified and disgusted. Some of them going, "Yeah, kill the men, obviously, but the women and the children—that's going too far." And you've got, you know, these officers arguing, going, "Well, yeah, but if you're going to do something about the Jewish, probably I'm afraid you're going to have to you're going to have to kill the women and the children as well." Like, it's absolutely unbelievable, and they're, you know, there's a paratrooper they capture in Italy who knows all about it and is talking about what's been going on in Eastern Europe. And it's this idea that if they knew, then how a bloke dressing up now couldn't possibly know. You know, as you say, Jim,
well, they do all know. I mean, I don't think that lovely fellow from Ludwigstadt, who ended up being an artillery officer in Italy at the end of the war and kept bursting into tears on me when I was interviewing him, I don't think he knew. I just don't think he did. I really don't. I think he was a sort of, you know, he's a country hick, and, you know, what did he know about anything? I just don't think he did. But clearly, you know, at heart they all did.
Yeah.
And, you know, that series I did on the BBC a couple of Christmases ago, where we had the Nazi home videos and stuff, you know, so, you know, those people are sending them back to kind of be developed in Frankfurt and Berlin and Munich and wherever, and you know all the developers are seeing all this stuff, and then they're kind of doing it. They're sending them back home to show people what they've been up to. So of course they're knowing. I mean, you know, it just. In fact, I found that thing one of the most convincing things of all to persuade me about just how many Germans were absolutely up to their necks in it.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely appalling that people would want to wear an SS uniform. I think it's really, really weird. I can't understand why you would. I would never go so far as to ban it, because I think, you should allow freedom of speech and stuff.
Yes,
and
banning things is bad.
Banning things is bad. Just don't ban it. But I think I would. I mean, I remember going to the War and Peace show down at the Hop Farm, which is a brilliant sort of military affair. And when I was first working on all this stuff, it was brilliant for me because, you could go around all these incredible stores and you could pick up stuff and handle things, and, you get a sort of feel for it in a way that, I've always been very into this kind of sort of tactile approach to the war, and kind of feeling the jackets and picking up the rifles and seeing how much they weigh, and just getting that kind of, you're just getting a little bit closer to it, aren't you?
Yeah.
That sort of vaguely experiential kind of level. But I do remember being absolutely shocked when I was standing in a queue for something, and suddenly I heard these German voices, and I turned around and there were these two guys in SS, and they were German. Oh. And you think, whoa, that's a bit kind of.
Yeah. That's
That's on British soil. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I felt and I felt utterly disgusted by SSGB as well. I just didn't like the idea of. I just don't even like thinking about the idea that the SS might have been here in Britain. So I find the whole thing just completely repugnant. I think it's really, really weird. And one of the things I think has been really good over the last years is the amount of British reenactors who actually want to be Tommies now rather than Americans or Wehrmacht.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's any place for it at all. I just think, shun those people. Just walk away. It's very, very odd. Very, very odd indeed.
We're going to take a very brief break, and we'll be back in a second. Where we're going to, I think, should we change the subject?
Yeah.
We'll see you in a tick. Bye. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, of course. Now we're putting that all behind us. Now you've read Helen Fry's stuff, haven't you, Jim?
Yeah, I haven't read this new one. I think Helen's great, and I'd be very keen to get her on the show because she's a lovely person.
Yeah,
she's very warm. She's very articulate and passionate about her subject, and she's just one of the world's nice people.
Yeah, well, because
she's doing fascinating work. Actually, she's doing really interesting.
Yeah,
work.
she is. She's doing an amazing job. I've got an idea for a We Have Ways project that I thought I'd run by you before I sicked on Tony. But basically, right after
you haven't
the
got any choice now if you're going to do it on there.
Well, after the war, right? So that one of the things they had going in this MI19 operation. So it's the bugging. So they run this extraordinary thing where they interrogate people, and then I think it's really clever because they interrogate people and then their rooms are bugged. So they go back to the room and go, well, that was close. They nearly got me to talk about the Focke-Wulf FW190. And then the other German will go, well, they don't want to hear about that plane because it's much better than any of their planes. And that's
so funny. I mean, don't forget, I remember reading all these. I remember reading wads and wads of these for Battle of Britain. I mean, they are folders which are, I'm putting my hands up, they're kind of, 4 inches thick. I mean, they are amazing.
Yeah.
It was reading those that got me onto this idea that the Bomber Command was bombing their airfields every night. Because all they do is go on about it.
Complain about
bloody RAF coming over, bombing Amiens again. It's all the Saint-Omer again. Got no sleep the other night. I'm absolutely exhausted because the bloody Blenheim's coming over.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, I digress.
One of the things they used to do is they had stool pigeons. So people, go as fake officers who would go in and talk to, it's incredibly dangerous, right? So they'd have people pretending to be German officers who go in to try and steer the conversation. But the other thing they did is they had a guy pretending to be Lord Aberfeldy, right? And Lord Aberfeldy he was an intelligence officer, and the idea was that he would, because he was a knob. That the Germans would warm to him because he was a toff, right? And Lord Aberfeldy would and they ran him as a kind of a stool pigeon, and he'd take them one side and go and say, I'm awfully sympathetic to what Hitler's trying to achieve and all that sort of thing. Anyway, after the war, and this is my We Have Ways project. After the war, A.R. Rawlinson, who was head of MI19, wrote a 3-part play for the BBC based on the Lord Aberfeldy ruse that went out on the Home Service in the 1960s, right? And they changed it to Lord Glenaldy, right? So it's, same but different. And Lord Glenaldy is cast as a fake aristocrat. This is from Helen's book. Working at a bugging site that holds German generals in a stately home. In one scene in the play, Glenaldy and the German general, given the name von Hussen, though it's probably von Armin or it's von Thoma or someone, do not succeed in achieving the surrender of the Channel Islands, which is a ruse they attempted out of Latimer House. They decide to stop off in Paris for the weekend without telling British intelligence. By Sunday, they had still not returned to Trent Park. There was panic within British military circles until Kendrick, known as Tommy in the play, received a phone call from Paris to say that Lord Glenaldy was partying in the capital with the general in tow. The irony was that the general trusted him so completely he did not attempt an escape. Now, at the time of its broadcast, the play was described in the press as factional, as some of the scenes are remarkably close to the facts and antics. So they did used to take them out. They took them to the Ritz. Or they took them to Smith's in Mayfair.
Extraordinary, I had no idea.
They took them to Smith's in Mayfair, and because one of the things they were going to do to break them was to show them that London was just carrying on. So they took them to Smith's in Mayfair. These generals taken out for lunch, right? Churchill gets wind of it. I cannot believe that the enemy is being treated so, right? So they switch to the Ritz because Churchill hasn't got his eye on the Ritz, right? It's absolutely unbelievable. They take them to the pub. There's one trip where they go to Whitby and they drink too much beer and a U-boat captain is heard shouting torpedo orders at the passing shipping and has to be sort of restrained and hustled back to Trent Park.
How
it's
brilliant.
Absolutely. So my plan is we find this radio play
and do it.
Publish it, put it out, try and get Radio 4 to redo it.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. I'm all over that like a rash.
Yeah. So that's
all over that like a rash.
Yeah. Anyway.
So and we should publish it. We should publish it in our list of things.
Yes, we should. Yeah.
We're republishing along with Padre Skinner's diaries.
But it's an extraordinary thing that something that super top secret.
Amazing.
Someone will write a radio play.
Well, I've just ordered the walls have here, so hopefully that'll come in time for my holes.
It's just fantastic, and obviously what happens is they start off with some U-boat captains, some fighter pilots, bomber crews, whoever they've accrued. Some people they captured in the battle for France, and then they get these massive influxes each time there's a big German defeat. So that a whole load of generals after and brigadiers and colonels and stuff after the North Africa, after Tunisia. Then once Sicily falls, a whole load of more, and after Normandy, a flood of people who are captured.
Yeah, of course. So does Helen know where this guy, what happened to this guy's papers?
Well, I'm gonna try and find out. Yeah, but I've asked her. How do we get hold of, find this? And I've asked some friends at the BBC who you go to at the Beeb to get this commission. Not comedy, you go to the drama department because they want comedies apparently.
Okay, fine, whatever.
In radio, but it's so interesting though, and they end up with the generals fighting. They end up with a pro-Hitler faction and anti-Hitler faction within this camp, and the Batmen are all like absolutely outraged that there's factionalising going on.
There's also that place up near Peterborough, isn't there?
Yeah. And Fontoma becomes the focus of the anti-Nazi faction.
Well, you could sort of tell that from you could almost tell it from the photographs of him captured at Alamein. Have you seen the pictures of him?
Yeah.
I mean, he just doesn't look like. I know this is a completely facile comment, but he doesn't look like.
He doesn't look the full. He doesn't look the full. He doesn't look the full.
I know that's ridiculous, but you know what I mean. He just doesn't. He doesn't have the bearing.
Yeah, but they're amazing. There's literally a team photo taken of them all, stood together. All the generals, that some of them refused to pose for because they didn't like the idea of being,
And then do you know about these about the Kaltenbrunner takes all these guys hostage at the end of the war?
Yeah.
So there's this 147 of them or something.
Yeah.
The VIP hostages, and they end up in the South Tyrol.
Yeah, that's right.
By this holiday resort. with if it doesn't work, then execute the lot of them, and it includes sort of Greeks and Brits and and Russian NKVD things, but also Franz Halder.
Yeah, yes, that's all very.
It's just amazing.
Very strange.
High-ranking German VIP prisoners.
What they do at Trent Park is they basically they get a load of leads. So they get them to talk, and they get all these leads about things that then get passed on to Bletchley, and look out for stuff about this.
Yes,
and it's Fontoma who talks about the V weapons, and then all sorts of pilots going, I was training at a testing facility, and we saw this. We saw this rocket thing. Oh, it's quite something, and it's really, really interesting that they get these leads, and some of it, some of it is absurd. So there's the idea that the V2 has a 10-ton warhead, and that which after all that Lindemann and co get very hung up on before the V2 first appears. They're really worried about how powerful it is. I mean, It's a fascinating book, and then she's got her last book's about Kendrick, who ran all this, who was in Vienna before the war, in Austria before the war, and thrown out for spying, and who's essential to the story. And again, he's one of those people. I'm not going to use the word forgotten because there's far too much forgotten baloney about the Second World War, but he's one of those people who's slipped through the cracks in the telling of the story. Anyway. The walls have ears. We must get Helen on because she's great fun.
Yeah, let's get on. Let's
really
get on.
Fascinating. Yeah.
No, I'm big fan of hers. And
then in the mail, I got sent this dusty volume. History of the Second World War.
Honestly, it's a work of genius.
Merchant Shipping and the Demands of War by CBA Behrens.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's the only British official history of the Second World War written by a woman, and it's completely brilliant. And it's utterly fascinating. B, the complexities of wartime shipping are so mind-boggling. I'm just this has opened up a whole new world of rabbit holes and lines and stuff. But I also want to congratulate CHA Behrens on her brilliant writing.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna read out a bit. So one of the bits she's absolutely amazing about is, and I think we should do a full-on session on this, but I'm just going to give you a little sort of flavour. So in sort of second half of 1940, when the Blitz happens, obviously what they then have to do is they have to get rid of the kind of East Coast convoys.
Yeah.
And most of Britain's freight moves around the country by ship. Particularly bulky freight, whether it be food, whether it be particularly coal. And coal is needed for absolutely everything. It's needed for all industrial processes. It's also obviously needed for railways, blah, blah, blah. But it is needed for ships, of course, as well. So it's just, coal is absolutely everything. So the whole of Britain is just sort of, covered in a fug of coal smoke. But they have to get rid of the East Coast convoys. So suddenly they have to, Greenock up on the Clyde and Liverpool and Cardiff and Bristol are suddenly getting this weight of freight that they haven't had, particularly Glasgow, stroke the Clyde, Greenock, and Liverpool. And it is absolute chaos because the stevedores, suddenly lots of stuff is just being dumped because suddenly you've got this sort of flurry of convoys coming in and there aren't enough people to deal with it. There's not enough cranes and machinery and derricks to deal with it. And so they just unload it very, very quickly and dump it. And all the stevedores and dockers and all the rest of it, they're kind of really unhappy about that. So they're threatening industrial action. And no one knows what to do. And the whole thing is just turning into a massive administrative, logistical cock-up of gargantuan proportions. So they think, what are they going to do? And there's this brilliant line. She says, in the meantime, while policy on a national scale was being evolved, the regional port directors had to make do where it was lacking as best they could. They were supposed to coordinate, in inverted commas, the various activities in their areas, but this word, like the confusion in inverted commas in the ports for which it was intended to prescribe the remedy, was merely one of those abstractions by which the human mind naturally seeks to explain facts so numerous and complicated as to defy description. You can't tell me this is not a work of genius. So what they do is they create these regional port directors. I think, okay, well, there's only one way around this. And this is one of the kind of sort of brilliance of our democracy, which isn't very democratic in the Second World War. So they put in these regional port directors and they go, okay, we're now going to call you a dictator. They are actually called...
Really?
Not officially, but they're saying, we're going to call you dictators in inverted commas. You are the regional port director, but we're going to term you as a dictator.
Amazing.
And your authority is absolutely total, except to one man, which is the Minister of Supply. He is the only person to whom you are answerable. Everything else, you can do whatever you like. And the regional port director, both in Glasgow and Liverpool, do such an amazing job of turning things around. Yeah. They give more money to the stevedores and dockers. They bring in more people. They get zillions of people to just work out the administration of how you deal with these convoys coming in. Yeah. That by the time of the Liverpool Blitz in May, although it's incredibly destructive and 3,500 people lose their lives, the efficiency levels have improved so much that it is a mere dent in the overall efficiency of the port and nothing more.
Blimey.
Because they all realise that suddenly this is time to up the game. So the game is so upped that it offsets the negative value of the Blitz on Liverpool. That's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And that, I promise you, Al, is just the
tip of the iceberg with this.
That is just I have given you one example. So the other thing that's absolutely amazing, I'll just do this one before we get on to, because another time we've got to talk about the problems of shipping and the two completely contradictory requirements and desires of the British and the Americans once the Americans come into war. So before the Americans come in the war, they're really happy to use merchant shipping on behalf of the British because they don't need it because their civilian supplies are absolutely fine. Once they enter the war, they need that shipping for the Pacific.
Of course.
So suddenly, with America in the war, it actually sets back Britain's ability to maintain her supply levels, particularly with that most important commodity of all, oil, because the world's no one has more oil tankers than the Americans do.
Yeah.
And so suddenly, from having the Americans completely on side before they're not on side, they're completely offside when they come on side. It's absolutely, it is amazing.
Because of the shift in American interest. So before the Americans are involved in the war,
and requirements and needs.
Well, exactly, but it's in America's interests to provide Britain with oil. But once America's in the war, it's in America's interest to provide America with oil.
But it's more than that. So civilian requirements. While supply is about civilian requirements, it's all fine.
Yeah.
But the problem is that once they're in the war, the Americans have military requirements that they didn't have before then.
Yeah.
Which they now need.
Yeah.
So that's the whole issue. And that whole thing has to be sorted out. And again, it puts on a completely different a completely different picture onto, of course, things like the Bengal famine, because it's not as easy as going, Churchill wanted to send a whole load of food to Bengal. It's like, well, he might want to, but he can't. But let me give you just one last example, which is the port of Freetown. So once France falls, most of West Africa suddenly becomes Vichy. And Vichy is kind of, vehemently against anti-British and might go to war with Britain at any moment. They're professing to go neutral, but they might not, as discussed before last week with Mike Nyberg. And so, but the British need a stop-off point. If they're coming from kind of India, from Australia, or all the rest of it, from the Suez Canal all the way around bottom of South Africa, they need a stop-off point for these convoys, and that stop-off point is Freetown. Now, Freetown is in, what is it? It's Sierra Leone. And up until that point is kind of, 2 or 3 ships in port at one time is busy. Suddenly, overnight, they have to have the capacity for 150. And Sierra Leone is not an advanced nation at the time. It doesn't have the infrastructure. The Freetown itself backs up onto mountains. There is not enough running water. There are not enough dockers or stevedores. There just isn't the labour. There is the labour on paper, but there isn't the trained labour. There is nothing like the coal or the coal storage. And you've got to transform this port in literally a matter of minutes into a kind of bustling major stop-off point, one of the most significant stop-off points in the entire world for the Allied war effort. Well, and they pull it off. And it is absolutely amazing.
Because I've got here open the map of the route convoy WS-18, which sailed from the UK the 15th of August 1942 to Bombay. So that goes Freetown, Cape Town, Durban, Bombay. And they don't all do all those stops. and these are monster ships, which are what they call monsters, or queens, which is your Queen Mary type passenger vessel, but not running at their normal capacity, but with, they're supposed to carry 6,000 people. They've got 15,000 soldiers on them. So essentially a division per ship. I mean, that's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely amazing. Well, listen to this. It would be difficult to find another port where so much was expected from such few facilities, there being no deep water berths, no dry dock, poor repair facilities, inadequate shore accommodation, insufficient European personnel, shortage of skilled labour, lack of building materials, inadequate stocks of food, and a trying climate.
Well, this says about these ships.
And also, the other thing is they're also competing with, because this is the start of the Takoradi route of aircraft over across Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and up to Egypt. And so you also need the supports and maintenance blocks to sort out the aircraft once they come off the ships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Anyway, we've got to wrap up, haven't we?
The master of the Queen Elizabeth, after the experience of one voyage with 15,000 on board, complained that when the ship heeled, he had observed an unusual and disconcerting motion that had not been apparent when only 11,000 were carried. I mean, jeepers. Even the ships don't handle properly. It's incredible. Right, we will see you.
And let's do more of this, because this is. I promise you, this is so fascinating. It's so interesting, and it's so unbelievably complex. Yeah. I am loving it, and she's my new history hero, CHA Barons. I can tell you, she's got a really lovely turn of phrase.
We will see you soon. Thanks very much for listening. Thursday, I think the treats keep coming. Put it that way. And Family Stories is back next Sunday. Yes, Thursday's Autumn Hendrickson and Reading, USA. We will see you soon. Cheerio.